All right, everybody, welcome back to Global Design Talk by btrax. I'm really excited to be talking to a business partner, a friend, Talia Baruch, and my co-founder and partner with GlobalSaké. Talia, why don't you introduce yourself and tell the audience a little bit about who you are?
Sure. Thank you, John, for having me. Thank you, btrax. So I'm Talia Zur Baruch. I've been in the industry for 25 years. I started as my education was applied linguistics and literature, French and English, and I started very much as from the language side of the house, content adaptation. My first work was actually in translation and trans-adaptation of poetry and of Broadway show, of literary and creative copy, marketing. It flew into marketing copy, creative content, and then did localization management at Google and VMware and other companies. On the vendor and on the client side, and then I pivoted from content adaptation to the diverse populations of the world to product adaptation. So I pivoted to heading international product and growth at LinkedIn and then at SurveyMonkey, where at the time it wasn't really, companies were not really hiring for an international product management role. Still, many companies don't. It's very siloed. You have product managers that are typically coming from computer science track, and then you have the localization team who are typically linguists, and they often or mostly always don't talk to each other. These are very siloed and separate functional teams in organizations, and there are a lot of problems resulting from that. So when companies are ready to launch, to grow internationally, we know that language support, so localization is handled, and it's very much seen as a language support effort, very much as a tail-end production effort. And but then on the other side of the house, you have the the product, which typically is driving the business, the product vision, and the product managers don't typically have the international orientation, and so the big questions are not really asked upfront. And so merging those two disciplines is really critical.
Thank you for that. And unlike some of our other talks that we've had, I'm going to start with what you've been doing most recently. So in the last 6 months, you started an international product management masterclass. Can you kind of share about that and how you designed that class based off of your previous experiences?
Sure. Yeah, so maybe I'll back off just a tad. And so in 2017, at the end of 2016, I left corporate America and started, co-founded with you GlobalSaké, which was really intended. My goal with GlobalSaké was very much to, again, bring the cross-functional alignment, bring the stakeholder leaders across the different functions in the organizations to talk about international expansion and learn from each other. And so we've been running GlobalSaké for 6 years now. With the industry events, we learn from each other, and our community has grown into over 2,500 members worldwide, all savvy. Everyone has an expertise in something, and everyone has many blind sides in many other things, and we learn from each other. And then in parallel, I developed a curriculum to teach international product management. So I taught at San Francisco State University and CEDIM, which is a design grad school in Mexico City, and then at MEES, Middlebury International Business School, and at Holt International Business School, that was more of an executive MBA. So there I taught things that are part of their curriculum, which is international UI UX design, product design, international digital marketing, and so on. And then this quarter, actually, right now, I'm teaching the first cohort of international product management, which is the course I had developed and adapted over time, and have launched the first course this quarter. It's called loc-learn, and you can find it on our GlobalSaké website. And the reason for teaching international product management is because it is not actually taught anywhere. And for professionals who want to are ambitious or have the drive to grow their career and become more effective leaders in the space, they can come from localization or from product or from UI UX design or any other discipline, but want to have a holistic understanding of what does it mean to develop design products for the diverse populations of the world and drive product-led growth in new markets. This is what the course is about.
Got it. And I guess, what are the key takeaways that you're hoping your current cohort kind of get from your class?
Yeah, so the first cohort currently is almost over, and I'm starting, registration is now open for the second course cohort. The students get basically, so I've developed a framework to think about the five core questions. So first of all, what problem are we solving for, right? So typically companies think about it within the perspective of their domestic market. They identify a gap, they have a certain solution for it, and they might do some market and user research within their domestic market, and then they launch it. Typically it's launched in English first, and then international is an afterthought, and they do the language support. Sometimes they do some deeper localization efforts, but we know that is not enough. We need to do some, how the product is going to be discovered, engaged with, how you're going to convert to paid, retention, brand loyalty. All these things are very different. And so when we ask those core 5 questions, so what problem are we solving for, and how do we need to reposition the value proposition based on the target new market, the competitive landscape, the lay of the land, so the regional and the cultural factors, the user expected behavior are very different in different markets. And so rethinking that value proposition upfront will help us not have to code freeze and refactor the code and rethink midway, how do we quickly pivot our value proposition to stay competitive and relevant, but rather have an upfront thought about it. So that's number one. Number two is, who are we optimizing the solution for? The addressable segment is very different in different markets, demographic, the sectors are different. Are we optimizing for existing customers versus for new customers, depending on whether it's a late adoption market or an early adoption market, depending on the product market fit. So who it is we're optimizing the solution for, is it B2B, B2C, different markets, you would want to go with one or the other. So it's not a global global strategy. There's no such thing as a global strategy. We have to have an upfront geo-relevant, geo-fit strategy and identifying the addressable segment there. The third question is, how do we define and measure success? So the core KPIs and the success metrics are quite different. Whether we're optimizing for top of the funnel, discoverability, and quality customer acquisition, or whether we're optimizing for existing users in a mature market, early adoption market, where we want to maybe more focus on the downstream funnel of, have we optimized pricing plans, checkout through completed orders, and we're minimizing the risk of involuntary churn in checkout to completed orders in those markets. And then, of course, retention and brand loyalty within the competitive landscape. So the how we define and measure success is going to be different by market. The fourth element is really the KPIs. Sorry, not the KPIs, but the core initiatives, the MVP, the most viable product. What are we going to launch first? What are we going to launch later? Based on 1, 2, 3. And of course, based on the target market, we have identified that that there is a good opportunity for us to invest in.
Got it. And I'm sure there's some really cool examples that we can talk about based off of kind of your experience, right? So if we're talking about redesigning a product, I've heard you speak before about how LinkedIn addressed China. Can you tell us a little bit more about how, first of all, why China, and then how you went about with your team to answer those questions that you just kind of brought up?
Right. Yeah, so when I was at LinkedIn, we had already adopted the core markets and the new opportunity was where we identified our market fit was China, MENA actually, and India. And for those markets, we did not just optimizing core funnels, but also building specific products for those markets, right? So, so for China, for example, very different ecosystem than the US. So again, thinking about all those elements, what problem we're solving for, who are we optimizing the solution for, how we define measure success. China is, at the time, this was a soft launch in 2014. So at the time, and of course still today, mobile first region. In 2014, US was not a mobile first region, still, it's not now much more, but not like Asia. And so mobile first region, much younger cohort. So for LinkedIn professionals and students, we were looking at the 17 to 24 year old cohort, whereas just as a comparison in Germany, it's a much older demographic, in Japan as well. So it's more of the 35 to 47 addressable segment for LinkedIn based on the demographic. And so that dictates the value prop, which is more career leadership, right? More senior job opportunities and content, relevant content. But for China, it was very much the younger cohort, and therefore that informed the value prop to be more about internship and first job, entry-level job seekers, right? So we built an off-stack, lightweight mobile app with a single value proposition of find the right job for internship and entry-level. Of course, it was, it was made in China, so all the APIs with the right ecosystem. So, of course, the WeChat integration in ABI, in address book import upfront. Sina Weibo, Tencent QQ instead of Twitter or Facebook, social signals, the whole native UI UX. When we design, of course, for Asia, it's a more guided user experience that is expected. And so, in Japan, having a Navi page, right, all these toolkits, and having more information in terms of why should I take a core action design for the page. So that influences the UI UX layout and design, very different from how we would design for the West. So much more, because it's more text heavy, we have it more organized in text boxes, and the top information would be in a different location on the page versus the expectation in the US. So very native UI UX. Culturally also, the guanxi, the concept of reciprocity and trust is very important in the region. And so building in marketing campaigns and, partnerships. We partnered with Alibaba for where you can upload your Ali score, to establish your professional trust. You could, the marketing campaigns were around reciprocity. If you join, if you bring on 3 other users with you when you join, when you sign up, and if you sign up with your real name and with a headshot and not with an avatar, which is something we wanted to promote, then you get all kinds of gifts. So all these tie-ins for cultural regional elements.
Got it. Interesting. And
then the most important thing, of course, we also cannibalized our own brand in the China entry at the time. So understanding also, again, culturally, that consumers and government in China optimize for local brands, and coming in as a U.S. external brand would be seen as a disadvantage. We actually did not go in as LinkedIn, even though we were LinkedIn. We went in. Again, it was an off-stack mobile app. And so we came in as a Chitu, different brand perception and recognition, of course, backed by LinkedIn's data in the back end. But it was launched very much as a native local app, very much seen as a native app brand. And then later on, Chitu was sunsetted, and because we realized that consumers wanted actually access to not just local connectivity, but actually connection density outside of China. And so we brought it into the back end and the mid-tier global platform. But but that's a different story.
Got it.
But it was a very successful entry adoption
Mm-hmm.
through applying all these, again, product enablements that are way beyond the language support, the translation of the content.
And that's on one opposite spectrum of like
Yeah.
really focusing on hyper local, hiring the team, everything's done local. And so you were working with local teams in China.
Right.
Is that rare?
China is very rare because this was an extreme and cannibalizing your own brand obviously is not necessary and is not necessary in for other companies and certainly not in other markets. But it depends on the level of adoption. Mm-hmm. But even much smaller things, even just as an example, if monetization is high in Germany, right? The expected behavior in Germany is very different than the US. Mm-hmm. And so even things like having explicit check boxes that are opt-in, all those things that would introduce friction in the US, right? Introducing explicit check boxes that the user needs to check in order to sign up or in order to go into the next step. That tell them exactly how we're gonna use, how we're gonna collect, use, and share their data, knowing that in Germany consumers are hypersensitive to data privacy and to transparency. Even that design element for Germany was very successful. So I did a lot of A/B testing in my time at LinkedIn and SurveyMonkey, and this is one example of a treatment that I would never introduce it in the US, but for Germany, not only did it not introduce friction, but we actually had a very significant, 10% lift in incremental new signups that, when we follow the unique user journey, actually also contributed to 25% of new paid. And actually 24% of those people in this treatment deployed their first survey, and for SurveyMonkey, the second deploy is the cliff to conversion to paid.
Got it.
And so understanding all this thought process and designing it into the product experience and performance by market can really, really lift your numbers significantly.
Got it. And you had buy-in from the exec level to be able to do these kinds of tests and this research. How were your teams structured? Like for China, it sounds like it was local, mostly. But for SurveyMonkey, for Germany, was it kind of HQ led? So
I would back up by saying it's probably the most difficult part of a localization expert or international product management owner is internal evangelism. Yeah. It is very, very difficult. It was very difficult for me, which is why I'm now training the next generation or even career developers to specifically on international product management so that they can become more effective. It's the most effective way to get the C-level buy-in for resource and budget is data. And so you do need to collect data and slice, do the country slice and the SQL queries to the data warehouse, ask different questions than what are typically asked in order to get the right insights. And of course, A/B testing by user geolocation and seeing the gaps in performance.
And did the conversation change depending on how early they thought about going outside of their domestic market, right? Like if it was already part of their initial focus was international versus maybe, we're going to address the US and then we'll see where we go after that.
Yeah, so almost every multinational corporation would say we are like our top 3. Sometimes they would even say our first corporate core objective is international expansion. They would say that, and they would say we are a global company. But they are not necessarily structuring the org and enabling global readiness from the get-go, right? So, saying you're a global company does not mean you have to do something about it, right? In order to truly be, and it's not about being global, it's about being global ready, right? And to be global ready, you do need to, right now, companies are typically structured into functional silos that don't necessarily talk to each other.
Yeah.
But having those cross-functional alignments and influence, right?
Yeah.
And so you can only influence if you are aware of the corporate core objectives and the trade-offs, right? The trade-offs, really, the cost benefit, the budgeting. And when you are a linguist and are responsible for localization, you don't have transparency to the corporate core objective and to the trade-offs. And you also lack the skill set to understand, okay, this feature or this enablement is important, but it's going to be, X number of engineering hours, and it has dependencies in the product, back-end, mid-tier, in order to render it, in order to dynamically render on the front-end UI UX. You have to sometimes, refactor the pricing or the payments platform. And so having, lacking this insight about all the costs and the amount of work and the dependencies that are necessary hinder you from being an effective leader and influencer into doing the right thing, right? And this is why really coupling the product management, so for international product management skills with the user empathy and understanding, user design for different usability around the world. Really, those two coming together really helps people understand each other and be able to work together effectively to deliver the right results.
That all makes sense. I mean, I'm always fascinated when I talk to people who are either in localization or translation because they are looking at it from multiple viewpoints, whatever the conversation. They have an empathy that just there isn't enough of, to be honest. Nowadays there needs to be more of that global readiness like you speak of because companies nowadays, they kind of have to be right off the get-go. It's so easy to use a product or a service even if it's not ready in your own language these days.
Absolutely. Even if I can, may I add, one element like data science. Data science is also typically a very siloed function, and localization don't typically engage with the data science team. But how companies, an example from, because I've been doing also consulting, I'm helping companies with product-led growth, so helping them optimize the core funnel, their priority target markets. So one of the companies, it's a two-sided marketplace of homeowners, and then on the other side, professional service providers. And they're basically, the way they slice their data, which is the way many US-based companies slice their data, is US-Canada versus the rest of the world, ROW. And first of all, we need to, explain that ROW is not a country, and so we need to do country slice. But even asking the right questions, because companies sit on a lot of important data, but how you slice and what you query, and then how you harvest that data and analyze it, and what is the story you're providing out of this analysis, that will dictate your whole vision and drive for the company. And many companies chase the wrong sun because the data was not sliced correctly. So, for example, they were, seeing that 70% of their monetization revenue comes from U.S. and Canada, and their goal was to lift revenue from international and focusing on the paid professional, right? Because they are the ones paying for the product. So the first thing I did was really look at the data, and by looking at, first of all, doing country slice, but by looking at, asking a different question, right? So by asking, what is the percentage of paid professionals out of the total professionals by country for that company, right? That tells us a very different story. So there we see that actually, even though 70% of the total revenue comes from US, Canada, based on this query, we actually saw that Japan, Germany, and France, the percentage of paid professionals out of total professionals by country was double that of the US.
Oh, interesting.
Right? And that is, and it's smaller in volume, but it's important to see that this is a trend, because that tells us that there is a healthy adoption of paid pro, so there's a healthy opportunity. Now we need to act on optimizing that remainder headroom growth
Right.
opportunity, right? But we would not, we would miss that insight, and therefore what we need to do about it if we didn't ask the right questions, right?
Right.
So the data part is really, really critical.
So where are they going next? Still figuring that out.
We haven't figured out, but it's still not something that I can
Got it.
disclose,
All
but,
right.
but good progress.
All right, good deal. We're running low on time, but I wanted to also ask, we have a lot of people here who are maybe just getting into the workforce, or, maybe you may have just convinced people to look into the loc-learn masterclass because they're interested in international product management.
Yeah.
But what advice would you give to somebody who's, let's say, Gen Z?
Yeah, great question. So, the world is changing on us rapidly, and I believe very strongly that the best education is, first of all, to open your prism wide, open all your antennas, and be, we don't need to know, no one person knows everything, and we cannot. But if we open our antennas, then we can be receptive to insights from others who know. And secondly, cross-disciplinary applications, right? So really integrating solutions across different disciplines is critical. We see a lot of merging. We used to have linguistics and we have computing. Now we have computational linguistics, and we can do generative AI with that and multilingual NLP. So cross-disciplinary is the name of the game, and being very open-minded to learning from each other.
Yeah. I love it. That's great. Thank you so much for joining today. You can learn more about Talia and the loc-learn program in the description. Please subscribe, like, and hit that notification button if you want to stay up to date on btrax Global Design Talk interviews. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.